Tea? Did you have some coffee? Do you like tea or coffee? Excellent. Okay. Before we proceed, I have to request you, while the speaker is speaking, try not to make too much noise. The accompanying teachers, please try and make sure that happens. Okay, before we begin, let me ask a question. How many... Okay, thank you for your comments. How many of you have washing machines at home? Raise your hands. Okay, most of you have. Okay, put down your hands. How many people have actually used a washing machine in your lives? No, seriously, be honest. You've actually washed clothes in the washing machine? Oh, that's nice. How does it work? You put your clothes, you put detergent, you put water, and then you press some buttons, right? But how does it work? How does the washing machine know that it has to wash clothes? How does it know that it has to wash for 10 minutes and then dry for 15 minutes and then hang around for 2 hours? I can't hear any of you because all of you are making too much noise. Come on, I want absolute silence right now. I want pin drop silence. You know what pin drop silence is. I'm pretty sure of that. I do not want noise. I have a question for you. How does the washing machine know what to do? Yes? Right. So, it says programs. For further clarification, please maintain silence as I requested and listen to the presentation. So this is by Professor Kamal Lodhia from IMSC, and he's going to talk about programs.
Thank you, Somdev. Can you hear me? No. Sound please. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to talk on what is a program, right? And of course the answer has already been given by Somdev. What is a program? Right? So the program is something which runs a washing machine. Correct? Is that correct? Are there any other kind of programs? For example, is this a program? Here. Is this a program? Did I run a program? What is this? Is this a program? Is there a program running inside this? No. Why? Why yes? Why no? Who said yes? What's your name? Yeah. What's your name? So why is it a program? Because I can do things like this. Yeah. Why is it not a program? Who said no? Why is this not a program? Right? So we normally think of computers as running programs, not these things, or not washing machines. Why? Because we can write programs to do many things, many different things. Okay? This thing is a slide changer. It can only change slides, it cannot do anything else. Right? A washing machine program is something which can run a washing machine. It can do a few things for a washing machine. Okay? But it cannot do anything else. Whereas when you write a program for a computer, right, then it can do many different things. Okay? You can write different programs, one program to do this, one program to play a game, one program to play chess, okay, one program to do chat, whatever. You can have many programs. One program to calculate the digits of pi. Okay, so if you are a mathematician, then that's what you are interested in. So that's something which we will look at. So if you study computer science at school, how many of you do computer science in school as a subject? Oh, There is a right left asymmetry out here. Okay, so then what you learn is a programming language. You are taught, at least in, yeah. So you are taught some programming language, C or Java or C++ or HTML, whatever programming language. You are taught some programming language. Okay, and what is this programming language like? There are some rules about how to write programs in this programming language. Correct? Right? And so for example, in say this, the examples I am taking are in C or C++. So here the example is I gets the value n minus m, and then there is a semicolon. Okay, and if you don't write the semicolon, it's a mistake, right? So you have to write I is assigned n minus m. This might be a legal atomic program, an atomic sentence inside your program. Okay, and it uses variables called I, n and m, 3 variables it uses. Okay, but if you look at this last one here, if I write n minus m equals I semicolon, this also uses the same 3 variables, but this is not a valid program, this is not a legal program, right? So there are some rules about how do you actually write programs, how do you get legal programs. So for example, you can make a conditional sentence. Okay. What is a conditional sentence? A conditional sentence is something of this kind, where you have I greater than j. If I greater than j, then you are supposed to do this, else you are supposed to do this. So this is called a conditional sentence, right? Or this is how you take 2 sentences and make a compound sentence, a conditional sentence out of a program, right? And what does this mean? What is this supposed to do? That if this program is run with I having the value 6 and j having the value 4, then what you do is you check whether 6 is greater than 4. Yes, 6 is greater than 4. So then I minus j, that is 6 minus 4, is assigned to I. So I gets the value 2. Okay. So this is how you write a program. A program says you do some atomic things, some atomic assignments, and then you check conditions, and you say if this condition is so, you do this, if that condition is so, you do this, right? So the person who actually formalized this thing was not actually a computer scientist, was a linguist called Noam Chomsky, and he showed in 1957 that you can actually have a grammar. You can define programs using a grammar, and what you are studying in school, in your school computer science, is actually this grammar. You are studying how you can write a grammar for a correct program, and what your compiler, when you run the program, what it's doing is it's checking that the program is correct according to this grammar. That's what. Here's another possibility. So this is a loop. So in the case of a loop, what do we have? So this loop is while I not equal to j, you do if I greater than j, I is assigned I minus j, else j is assigned j minus I. So this is the same conditional statement which I had on the last slide, but now I put it inside a loop. So inside the loop, I say while I is not equal to j, do this. Okay, and what does this say? So what does this do? So let's say suppose the program begins with the variables n, m and p, taking the values 10, 4 and 14. So here n is 10, m is 4 and p is 14, right? Now what happens? First you do this 10 minus 4, so I is assigned 6, okay. Then you do this p minus n, which is, what is it, 14 minus 10, so j is assigned 4, okay. Then you check that I is not equal to j, so I is not equal to j, yes, 6 is not equal to 4, okay. Then you check this, is 6 greater than 4? Yes, 6 is greater than 4, so you do this, so I gets assigned 2. Now so this is one loop iteration. In one repetition of the loop, of the while loop, what have you done? You have assigned, you have managed to assign 4 to j, okay. Now you go back here and check whether I is not equal to j. Is I not equal to j? Well, I is 2 now, 2 is still not equal to 4, okay. So yes, so you do another loop iteration. In the second loop iteration, what do? You again check with is 2 greater than 4? No, 2 is not greater than 4. So you say else. Else what should you do? J should be assigned j minus I. Okay. So what happens here? During the second loop iteration, j gets assigned 2. Okay. So j gets assigned 4 minus 2, which is 2. Okay. No, sorry. Yeah, 4 minus 2, which is 2. Okay. Then what happens? Then again you go back and check the loop condition. Okay. Is j not equal to I? Well, j is 2 and I is 2. So 2 not equal to 2 is not correct. 2 actually equals 2. Okay. So j I equals j. So when I equals j, you come out of the loop. Means you come here at the end. So the loop execution is over. And at that point, what has happened? Both I and j have the value 2, and so the loop execution of the loop has ended, and the program has also ended, right? So what have you done? What you have done is you have some assignments. So there is an assignment, then you put another assignment, then you have a while loop, and inside this while you have an if else, and inside the if here you have another assignment, and here you have another assignment. That is what you have built using this grammar of programs, right? So this is a compound sentence which you have built out of smaller sentences by using this if else and while and for, and there are many things which you can learn in a programming language, right? And what does the question is, this is what you construct, but what does this program do actually? Okay. What did this program do? What it did is it started with some values n, m and p, so 10, 4 and 14, and it ended with the values of I and j as 2. Okay. So what did it actually do? Supposing it had started, instead of 10, 4 and 14, supposing it had started with some 140 and 140, okay, what would it have done? Yeah?
So I think it found the LCM of the three numbers.
The highest common factor, or GCD. It finds the GCD of the number 10 minus 4, okay, and the number 14, which one was that? 14 minus 10, right? That is what it did. So if you had started with 140 and 140, then it would have found the highest common factor or greatest common divisor of 100 minus 40 and 140 minus 100, okay, which would have been 60 and 40. So, and what would be the HCF of 60 and 40? 20, right? So this is what this program would have done. This is actually the most common program which is usually taught in a programming course, and this particular way of calculating this was devised by somebody very old, Euclid, in the 3rd century. So you remember in the first talk today we had some Diophantus in the 3rd century. So here we again go back to 3rd century, and this is called Euclid's algorithm, although it is also known in other places, but it's known as Euclid's algorithm. And what this program does is it applies this Euclid's algorithm and gets an answer, right? Is this clear? Any doubts, just ask me straight away, so then I can explain them to you right away instead of waiting for the end, right? Okay. So what is a program? A program is you take some small sentences, put them into form bigger sentences, and you get one big long thing. Okay. Typically programs are like thousands, lakhs of lines long. Okay. So programs are very, very big things. Okay. This person, Peter Naur, he is a winner of the Turing Award, and he edited the Algol report. This defined a programming language called Algol. Okay. No, we don't use it today, but in 1960 it was used, and this was the first programming language for which a grammar was given. Right? This grammar was given using the grammar devised by Chomsky, whom you saw in the last slide. Okay. But now there are other things. Okay. The variables might have to be declared. So there might be, you might have to say that I, N, M, J, P are integers. Okay. And there are some things called subroutines. For example, you could use a subroutine swap PQL, which could be used to exchange two words, and then you can call this subroutine. If you can't see this, this says call swap 165. Okay. So I'll show this on the next slide. The person who first implemented subroutines is John Backus in the programming language Fortran. Okay, Fortran is a programming language which is still used today, and maybe even in this institute. Right. So this is somebody who devised this idea of subroutines in a programming language, and this is how this program would look with subroutines. So I have the same assignment to I, the same assignment to j, but while I is not equal to j, if I greater than j, I call swap, do this, else I call swap and do this. Okay, so I can make more and more complicated, and finally I call swap again, right. So this is a very complicated program that I have built. Okay, so using these subroutines, so that swap is defined somewhere else. I am not showing you where swap is defined, but you define swap in some place, and what it does is it exchanges these words, okay, and then you do some kind of, you keep doing this loop, so you will get a program. So for example, if you swap behaves as you expect it, and if you take some m, n and p to be 1, 6 and 11, and you take some string like this, and this is position number 1 and this is position number 6 and this is position number 11, okay. So when you execute this, the word from 1 to 6, that is Kalam, and the word from 6 to 11, that is Abdul, they will get exchanged, okay. And what you will get is, instead of Kalam Abdul, you will get Abdul Kalam, right. And in fact, this complicated program, what it will do is, Kalam Abdul will work because Kalam and Abdul both have equal length, okay. And what this program will do is, since the length is equal, you will come straight out here and exchange Kalam and Abdul, okay. But this program also works when the two words are not of equal length, okay. So if you have something like this, you have Mr. blank Turing Allen, okay, and you give the values of m as 4, 10 and 14. So 4 is T and this 10 is this A and 14 is that comma out there, okay. And now if you run this program, you will get Mr. Alan Turing, right. So this is something which, this is a program which is a complicated thing which does all this, okay. Okay. And then there is something called object oriented programming, okay, and you have these things called objects, and they have some variables of their own, and they have something, their subroutines are called methods, and you can call these methods and so on, okay. So you can see that this is all very, very boring, right. So what you learn actually is all these things, and the definition, if you take a definition of a programming language like C or Java or any C++, whatever programming language like that, it's one big fat book, okay. It's a very huge book, and the question is, if you are a programmer or a computer scientist, is this what you are supposed to be doing? Are you supposed to be learning what is there in the book, okay. So or what you should be learning is programming, okay, not how to write grammatically correct programs, okay. It's like saying that when you learn English, should you be learning the grammar of English, or should you be learning how to write in English? Should you be learning how to write an essay in English, okay. So that's the kind of question which we are talking about, right. And so that motivates the question which I am asking in this talk, which is, what is a program, okay. And here is a very short answer, okay. So in this institute, of course, we ask what is a program mathematically and what is a program scientifically, right. Okay. So what we say is, so first thing is, let me start with some basics. So addition is a function. Mathematically, addition is a function. It takes two integers and returns an integer. So when you say 2 plus 3 is 5, then what you are saying is the addition function takes the inputs 2 and 3 and gives the output 5, okay. Or the multiplication function takes the integers 2 and 3 and gives the number 6, okay. The addition function, if it is given 20 and 30, it outputs 50, okay. So what do those basic assignments in the program do? They implement some basic function, okay, some function which you will learn in school like addition or multiplication. Some other functions are also there, okay. So this is what the atomic sentences of a program do. They do some basic function, they use some known function, okay, and most of them you will study in school, okay. So now what is the function computed? by some atomic sentence like I is assigned n minus m. Okay, it's a function. So I'll write it like this inside these brackets. It's a function which takes two integers and returns three integers. Oh, sorry, returns an integer. That's wrong. So here it takes 10 and 4 and gives the answer 6. Okay, because it does 10 minus 4 and that is what it puts there. Okay, it takes 104 and gives the answer 96. Okay, it takes 100 and 444 and gives the answer minus 344. Right. So why am I calling it a function? Because that function can take different inputs and give a different output depending on that. So it's a function. Okay. So the first person actually who defined the idea of a function was Leibniz in Germany in the 17th century. Okay. So if you take some more complicated sentence like I is assigned I minus 1 function which takes 4 and gives 3, takes 3 and gives 2, takes 0 and gives minus 1 and so on. Right. So there is a function which takes some inputs, the things on the right hand side, it takes the variables on the right hand side and gives you the value of the variable on the left hand side, and that is assigned to the variable. Okay. Now what do you get in a more complicated sentence? So for example, you take this followed by this. What is the function now? So first we fix the order in which we fix the order I n m j p. So I'll write this as I n m j p. So I say I take some value for I, take the value 10 for n, take the value 4 for m, take 100 for j, 100 for p, then what I will get is 6, 10, 4, 100, 100, meaning that j, p did not get changed, n and m, 10 and 4 were used to calculate the value of I and you got 6. Okay. So what you do is you take something out here and you take 5 integers and you get 5 integers back. What does this do with these 5 integers? Well, this minus 1, minus 2 etc. are not used at all. So all you do is you take 100 minus 4 and you put that in I. So you get 96. Okay. Similarly, you take 104, 44, you put minus 344. The rest you don't touch. Okay. So this is what a program does for 5 variables. Okay. Now if you take this S2, this j is assigned p minus n, then what it does is it takes some numbers like this and does again a similar assignment. It computes another function from 5 integers to 5 integers. What does this do? It takes the last one here and the last one here, okay, and puts that inside j. So it takes these two and puts it inside j, okay, because j was the 4th variable which we took, right. So what we have is you take again one 5 tuple and you get another 5 tuple back. Okay. So this is what S2 did. Now if you want to say what does S do? What does S do? It takes your inputs, first does what S1 is supposed to do, then you do what S2 is supposed to do, right. So you take one function, apply first the first function, then you apply the second function. So you take the inputs, apply the first function, you get some intermediate outputs, you apply the second function to this intermediate outputs and you get the final output, that is S. Okay. So what you have is, so what have I done? Instead of talking about assignments, now I am talking about functions. So I am saying an assignment gives you a function, but 2 assignments also give you a function. How do you get that function? By taking this function, applying this, let's say if this is the first one, you apply this one first and then you apply this one second, right. So that is what we got, okay. So if you take now a more complicated thing which is a conditional, what does this do? Okay, so here you test whether I is greater than j and you do this assignment, if I is not greater than j then you do this assignment. So what do you get? The function which is defined by case analysis, and you say this function on the inputs is the function C1 applied to the inputs when the function b evaluates to true, and it is a function C2 when b evaluates to false, right. So this is what we do for if then else. We check the value of what b does, what the value of b is on the inputs. If it is so, we apply the function C1, otherwise we apply the function C2. Okay. So far, is this too easy? Are you getting what is going on out here? I am just defining functions, lots of functions. Okay. Yeah. So So now we come to the hard part, which is we come to a loop. What is the function computed by this loop? Okay. So now if you see what we did in the loop, what we have here is the function of this loop L is, suppose the condition B is false. If the condition B is false, then you come straight out of the loop. That means the function takes the value inputs and gives the same inputs back as the outputs. Okay. So when B inputs is false, you do this. But what if B inputs is true? If B inputs is true, then you run this, whatever this C does, so that is you apply the function C inputs, and then after that you check B again. And if this is false, then you come out. Okay. Or what do you do if this also happens to be true? In that case, you get C applied to the inputs, and this happens when B applied to the inputs was true, B applied to the C applied to inputs was true, and B applied to C applied to the inputs was false, right? And so you keep doing this repeatedly. But this is not a definition, right? All I am saying is, if the loop executes once, it is this. If the loop executes twice, it is this. If the loop executes 3 times, it is this. I mean, where does the definition stop, right? So how do I say what is the function which is computed by this particular while loop? Okay. Do I have a solution for this? So what this person Christopher Strachey realized that you can actually write something like this. What can you write? You can say the function L applied to the inputs is when the Boolean condition of the loop condition is false, then it is just the inputs, it returns the inputs. But when it is true, then what you do is take C of the inputs and then apply the function of the loop again. So the function L applied to the inputs, you first check whether the condition B is true or false. If the condition B is false, then it is just the inputs. If the condition B is true, then what do? You apply C to the inputs and then apply L again. Okay. But so we can write something like this, but this is wrong. Why is it wrong? Because that we are trying to define L, and in defining L we are again using the definition of L, right? So this doesn't give this is not correct. We can't, in a definition you can't use what you are trying to define. Okay. So but now we use school mathematics. In school mathematics, what do we know? We have equations. Okay. What are equations? So here is an equation. So you saw these equations, Diophantine or otherwise. Okay. So you have equations like this: x equals 5x plus 3. Now what do you do with these equations? You solve them. That's what algebra does. What algebra does is you move this x on this side, or I don't know, maybe, so you get 4x, move this on that side, you get minus 3, and then you divide, so you get x is minus 3 by 4, right? So when you have an equation, there is a way of solving an equation, okay? And this way, as I say, was devised by the Babylonians long ago, right, in 1500 BC, right? That's when, since then, people have been doing these things in school, right, learning how to solve equations. And the question therefore is there some algebra for solving equations on functions? This is what Christopher Strachey realized. Christopher Strachey realized that in a program, if a program is supposed to compute functions, then what you are trying to do is, when you write a while loop, you are writing an equation between these functions, and now the question is there an algebra for these functions, right? And this person, Dana Scott, he is the logician, he gave a way of solving these equations. Okay. So what he showed is that you can indeed solve these equations, and that is the function which is actually computed by a program. Okay. So this is a kind of mathematical definition. I mean, more technically, he showed that programs always compute continuous functions. Okay, they compute functions which satisfy certain kind of properties, and these continuous functions you can solve. You can always solve continuous functions. I mean, you can solve equations over continuous functions, right? So that is something which was showed by this. So what we have arrived at is that a program is a solution of a linear system of equations over an algebra of continuous functions. Okay? But that is as boring as what is there in your school textbook, right? Because what do you understand from this? Okay, school textbook is big and fat and thick, but out here, okay, this is not big and fat and thick, but now you have to understand all this. You have to understand what is a linear system of equations, you have to understand what is continuous function, you have to understand some algebra. Okay, so is this what you really want to do? Okay, so for example, here is an application. Okay. So that's the first ever mobile phone developed by Motorola in 1973, and this is John Mitchell, who is the president of Motorola, who is trying to show you how to use a mobile phone. Okay. So supposing all I am doing is I have my mobile phone, okay, which is also a computer. There is a computer inside that mobile phone, and I am chatting with my friend. What function am I computing? Is there any function which I am computing out here? Okay. I said that a program is a function. There is a program going on in this mobile phone. What function is it computing? Right. So basically a mobile phone, I mean, what is a mobile phone actually? A mobile phone is some device on which there is a program running, and what is this program doing? It is computing the identity function. What is the identity function? The identity function is a function which takes an input and gives back the same input as output, right? So what this mic that I have, what function is it computing? It's computing identity function, okay? Because what I'm saying, there's a waveform, those waveforms get recorded in this, then they are sent to that loudspeaker out there, right? This is a function computed by this sound system, and then it's broadcast from there, and that's how you get to hear it. That's how the people at the back get to hear it, right? So what you are doing is you are computing an identity function. That's what this mic is doing. What is a mobile phone doing? A mobile phone is also computing an identity function. Okay, so when I speak into the mobile phone, okay, then the same waveform is getting recorded, but the person who is listening can be somewhere far away, and then that person gets that same signal or at least something like the same signal. Okay, hopefully the mobile phone sounds good. Okay, so what you have is 11:45. Yeah. So this is what you have. Okay. So what does a mobile program do? What I said is true for a ordinary phone also. What is special about a mobile phone? What is special about a mobile phone is that, oops, what is that? What is special about a mobile phone is that you have the user here, then there is some transmitter, and there is some base station out here. Okay. And there could be other transmitters. So what you are doing is you are talking to a transmitter which is nearest to you on the mobile phone, and that transmitter sends it to the base station, and then it's sent to somewhere else. But what can happen is you can move. While you are talking on the mobile phone, you can be in a car, you can be in a train, you can be anywhere, you can move. And when you move, what the mobile phone does is it switches from this transmitter to that transmitter. Okay? So earlier you were using this transmitter, and maybe that transmitter was not being used by your phone. I mean, it's not idle, it's being used by other people's phones, okay? But you are not using this transmitter. So what the mobile phone does is it switches to this one, okay? So a mobile phone is computing an identity. The person who is doing the transmission keeps changing all the time, okay? So what kind of function are we talking about? So if you look at a mobile phone program, then it looks something like this. Okay. So it looks very complicated, but it's not so difficult. So you are the user, and either you talk or you switch. when you switch the talk channel, you go from TS, you switch. What does the transmitter do? The transmitter, what it does is, if you are talking, then it behaves like the transmitter, or you send a loose signal and get a gain signal back, and at that point you start using the idle transmitter. Okay. So what this is doing is, there is just some small programming language. What this programming language does is, what it says is, I get a message. When I get a message saying switch, then I change the transmitter. I go from this transmitter to that transmitter. Okay. So what you have is a programming language in which you have other kinds of what are the atomic sentences in this programming language now? The atomic sentences in this programming language are things like talk and switch and lose and gain. These are now my atomic sentences. Okay. And then what I do is, I use some kind of so if these define some kind of functions, then I have some way of building compound functions out of this. And you can see that there are equations, because I am using user here and I am using user here. Okay. So what do I get? This is again a program, and you can again see it as some kind of equations. Okay. And what you need is the following things. So these are the questions. Okay. Which is, if you have a programming language for networks, then the programming language for networks is more complicated than a programming language for C or like C++ or Java. Okay. And what it does is, you have to set up equations, and now you have to solve these equations. So just as what Scott and Strachey showed us is that you solve equations over an algebra of functions. Now you have to solve over an algebra of something else, right? And that algebra is called processes. Okay. And so it's an algebra not of functions, but an algebra of processes. Okay. And there are many questions which are not answered about this so far. So I'll just stop with that. And the only question which I want to say is, okay, maybe all this is very complicated. Do you always have to think about algebra? Right? Instead of using algebra of functions, I talk of algebra of processes. And is this what you really want to do? Okay. So for example, when I'm playing chess on a computer, okay, what function is being computed? There's some chess playing program I'm playing with. Is that program, what function is it computing? It cannot compute any function, because I have to play, no? Then it makes a move. Okay. Then I make a move. So, but depending on my move, the function will be different, right? So is there actually some function being computed out here? What is actually happening? So this person, Hintikka, who was a philosopher, he said that instead of thinking of programs as computing functions, we think of programs as playing games. Okay. Games in a mathematical sense. So your programs actually play games. Okay. And what you are doing is actually finding solutions for games of this kind. And I want to end with this slide. So the persons who showed that one can think of programs as strategies in games, there are many people, Abramsky, Jagadisan, Malakaria, and I just wanted to point out Radhakrishnan Jagdishan, who did school in Madras. Okay. So he is one of the person who is associated with showing that programs can be thought of as strategies in games, and these can be solved in some way. Okay. So let me stop with that. Thank you.
Questions? Anyone? Questions? Upstairs? Yes, balcony.
Yeah. So all, even ordinary computers, even this laptop has hardware and software, mobile also has hardware and software. So the hardware also computes some functions. So when I said, for example, the addition function, it may be that actually your hardware does the addition. So you can take two numbers and add them, that might be done by hardware. You may not, so the basic functions, when I said that those are implemented, those are implemented by hardware. So hardware does the basic thing, and what the program does is it puts these basic things together. So just as I wrote a program here which has which is a composition of functions of different kind, okay. Similarly, you can write a program for the hardware which has small instructions for the hardware, and that is what the compiler does. The compiler takes a program like this and gives you a program for the hardware which is run by the hardware. Yeah, and that's what happens in mobiles also. Yeah. Sorry? Yeah, so if you are doing some kind of if you are doing several things in a mobile, it's possible to do several different things simultaneously. You can be running a game also, and you can also be trying to talk to a person, right? So you can have more than one program running at the same time. That's possible in a mobile. Yeah. But what I was trying to point out is that the atomic things which you do are not just addition and multiplication and so on, but they are also communication. That is also built into the mobile. So that's a new kind of function which is there in the mobile. Yeah.
Yes, question there. Yeah.
See, when we write programs, we need something that runs the program, right, like a compiler. So to make this compiler, you need some sort of another program, and to make this program, you need another. So how did they write the first program ever?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And the answer is to write your program is a piece of software, the compiler is a piece of software, okay, but finally you have to get to the hardware, and the hardware is something which runs by itself. The hardware then does not have any further thing to go to, right? So the hardware, as he said, is actually a circuit made up of gates and transistors, and these days integrated circuits, all kinds of things, okay, and that directly runs the, so that does not have to go to some other level, okay. So the hardware level is the final level at which things run, okay, and that can do only very simple things. So it can do simple things like addition, and why couldn't we put everything onto the, and why could this whole computation of highest common factor, we could have made the hardware do that also, right? But we don't do that. What we do is we make the hardware do only very small things, only very basic things like addition and multiplication, and they can be used to build bigger programs, and then the bigger programs can be whatever you want. You can choose what you want to do.
Yes.
This is perhaps an unfairly general question to ask, but can you just say a few things about the limitations of computation?
Yeah, there are certain things which computers cannot do, and Alan Turing was a person who first showed that computers cannot do. At least I used to give an example that computers cannot, I mean, I come to work here on a bicycle, and a computer cannot run a bicycle, but that's no longer true, because now you see that people are trying to develop computers which can drive cars by themselves. So if they can drive cars, maybe they will be able to drive bicycles also, right? So but there are certain things which we know that computers cannot do, okay. So far the only kind of things which we, only kind of functions, for example, which computers cannot compute are those which are kind of cooked up, okay. So there are numbers, let's say from, there's a function from Ramsey theory in mathematics, and then you can show that this particular function cannot be computed by a computer, okay. So but that's a very artificial function, it's not something which we actually use in daily life, so to speak. So far, I mean, almost anything that people have wanted to do using computers, they found, at least as far as functions are concerned, okay. And now we find that they can also be used for driving cars, and they can be used for running washing machines, and you can do all kinds of things, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you said that hardware is like the base for everything, but to make the hardware do things, that's why you need the software. So Like, how was the first software ever made? Like,
Yeah. So the first programming language, so in fact, was see ultimately what does the hardware do? What the hardware does is it takes some signal like 10101 or something like that and says that 10101 means that I do addition. So there is a circuit which says that 10101 means addition, and you activate the addition circuit, right? Yeah. So when that was built, it was built in such a way that whenever it got 10101, you do addition. And what people in older times used to do is actually you would plug some wires and set it to 10101, and then it would do the addition, and you would see the output.
How does it understand 1010?
No, that okay. Understanding is a much more difficult thing, right? I mean, for example, I mean, I speak in my mobile phone, and somebody gets an output. So, is my mobile phone understanding English? Okay, or Tamil or whatever. What it's doing is it's doing a certain amount of communication, right? And what a computer is doing also is a certain amount of communication. So what that circuit is doing is you give it some inputs, it gives some output. Okay, so it depends on what you mean by understanding, and that is not very clear.
So I'll just yeah, quick final question.
What type of program? Yeah. So what a mobile phone has is a program which will take the signal which I am speaking. So it's a wave. I mean, you can think of it as sound waves. Those sound waves are converted into bits. So it will be converted into a digital symbol. So maybe when I say ka, that ka will actually become some 11000, something like that. So everything that I say is actually converted into a sequence of bits. Now these bits are sent through radio or through a wire or something to the receiver, and at the receiver, so if that signal is again that 1010 is again converted into sound wave, and that sound wave is broadcast from there. That's how it's done.
All right. More questions later, perhaps. Let me thank Professor Kamal for the talk. Before we move on to the next section, just a quick point that as you were talking about mobile phones, the computer that this mobile phone has is more powerful than the computer that took human beings to the moon. Just think about that for a second. Second question is, if I give you a bucket of water and ask you to stand on it, will you be able to do it? Anyone? Can you stand on water? Can you walk on a swimming pool filled with water? Yep. No one has any yes or no answers. Can you or can you not walk on water? Yes, you can. Why? How? How? Who said that? Yes. Okay. Yeah. So suppose what in a swimming pool in Chennai. Okay. So that rules out ice. Okay. Yes. If you move fast enough, no, it's pretty long. I mean, suppose the sea. Okay. But is there some other liquid that you can walk on? Oh, okay. Damn it, they know. Okay. Right, okay. So hopefully, and mercury as well, yes, dense enough. Right, so moving on quickly to the next, sort of double segment right now. So we'll be having, right. So we'll be having quiz prelims simultaneous with Meet the Scientist. So Meet the Scientist will be here. For quiz prelims, please follow Madhusudan. Madhusudan, please, sort of show yourself. This is Madhusudan. This is your quiz master. So fear him, okay, for today at least. So please follow him for the quiz prelims. He's going to take you to the deepest sections of hell right now. Move out, guys. Oh, you want? Sorry, don't move out before announcements. Those who are in the other rooms listening to the talks, please come back if you want to attend the Meet the Scientist. And now I'm going to hand it over to President Indumati, share some announcements.
Okay, so this room here will be for asking your questions to the scientists. So I think there are people from, how many of you are 8th standard and below? Can you please put up your hands? Okay, 8th standard and below, okay, about 30-40% of the students, people above, okay, fine. So you can ask whatever questions you want, it doesn't matter. There's a group of scientists here who will answer it. So we have made a quiz, the quiz will be in 2 rounds. Yeah, you can put your hands down now, thanks. The quiz will be in 2 rounds because there are so many of you, we can't have everyone here in the evening. So there will be an elimination round, and for the elimination round, those who want to participate in the elimination round, it's a written quiz set of questions, general enough, maybe a little harder for the smaller children, but I think everyone is welcome to try your luck. So you will have to go to room 423. So in case you get lost, you have to go to room 423, okay? And it's down here and the top floor, and you must follow various people who are in grey. They will know where to go, okay? And those of you who want to ask your questions, I will be here. I will introduce the scientists later. You can ask your questions. Ninga Tamil la venona kekala, Hindi में पूछ सकते हैं, शायद गुजराती में भी, हाँ तेलुगु लो अडगच्चु, मलयालम अरियल्ले, Bangla, oh yeah, Bangla. So feel free, take your language of choice. Gujarati there, yes, you can speak in Gujarati as well. I think there's a good representation of languages. And if you don't want to speak at all, you can write down your question on a piece of paper and pass it down to us. Okay? We'll be very happy to answer. Whatever we can answer, we will answer. What we can't answer, you please leave your name and address, and we will actually try and find the answer and mail it back to you. Okay? So I hope you'll enjoy yourself with that program. So now those of you who want to go for the quiz written test, please get up. Only those of you who want to write the quiz, please get up and exit from this side. Please exit from this side so you can follow